Achoo! Ah, get your earth germs away from me. Finton, it's just a cold. I don't think you can even get sick from our germs anyway. I'd rather not take a chance. I've got a realm to protect. Right, that's true. The Order of the Pawn is finally assembled. Any chance you could share a release date for Chapter 1? Haha, no chance at all, my friend. That announcement is reserved for another podcast. Wait, really? Which show? Mina Howell's Penny Dreadfuls podcast. Next week, in fact. You're lucky I like Mina. That's a big announcement. The series has been over 5 years in the making, after all. Sure, 5 Earth years, but that translates to far more Krona in Devine. How long is it then? How should I know? I'm a bard, not a mathematician. You know, it's questions like that make me want to announce the new series on Mina's podcast. Alright, well, hopefully our interview on this episode goes better than this intro is. Wait, what interview? I'm interviewing you on this week's episode about the upcoming series. What? When did you tell me this? Literally a week ago. I looked you right in the eye and I said, Finton, I'm interviewing you on the podcast this week after I get back from my trip. And you said something snarky like, your show would be lucky to have me, but I'll be there. That's a terrible impression of me, but yes, I remember now. I'm glad we cleared that up. Welcome, everyone, to the Saved as Draft podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 32 of the Saved as Draft podcast. I hope you enjoyed that little Clinchport mini-episode last week. This week I'm back from my trip, but I unfortunately came down with a nasty cold the day before I left. So I apologize if my voice sounds a little off during this episode. I'm doing my best here, so I promise by next episode it should sound normal again. As a result of being under the weather still, today's episode is going to be a bit on the shorter side. For today's episode, we're going to check out some weekly shoutouts, look at power-up prompts, and discuss serial fiction on Substack and how to get started. Then, I'll sit down with Finton Marybrook himself to talk about the upcoming Devine series, The Order of the Pawn. Voidy's also under the weather, so he's skipping this week's episode. But with all that housekeeping out of the way, let's get into this week's shoutouts right after this short message. Hey, stop right there. I've got a bone to pick with you. What's wrong? Why are you all sweaty? I've been trying to find Substack since last week's episode. I've been around the entire world, twice. Arnold, it's not a physical location. It's a publication on Substack. Why didn't you tell me that? I'm going to crush you to a pulp. Wait, Arnold, Hazel just announced that Substack is getting its own website, and you can catch a sneak peek very soon. Go on. You can visit bookstack.com starting September 1st to check out the website and provide feedback as well through a handy form. Wow, I love feedback. Yeah, me too. Okay, I'm going to find a computer. Okay, good luck with that. And for everyone else, check out the Writer's Journey subscriber chat for more info from Hazel themselves on the upcoming launch of the Substack website. And now, back to the show. And we're back. And as many of you know, every week, I post a thread on my subscriber chat where I ask you to share links to your latest work for a chance to be featured as a shout-out on the show here. I pick 5 at random, and I also work with Mina Howell's Penny Dreadfuls podcast to offer writers a chance to be featured there as well. One thread with 2 chances to be featured, you ask? In this economy? Yes, we're making it work. So be sure to check out the weekly thread where you can share your latest work. With that, let's jump into this week's shoutouts. Our first shoutout this week is Souvenirs by Sarah. This is an incredibly sweet microfiction piece that also includes a prompt and request. It tells the story of how little keepsakes can trigger memories we thought long forgotten. At the end, it asks the reader to write a story about memories, and to forward this piece to a friend that believes in second chances. Both of these things play wonderfully into the themes of the story itself. Here's a tiny excerpt so I don't give away too much. Suddenly, it was a lifetime ago. She was in New York with a young man. They were in love, but life had other plans. They exchanged souvenirs with their names on, the type you find at any tacky souvenir stand. A beautiful little piece, and I love the prompt and the request at the end to pass it on. Awesome work from Sarah. Second this week is Swan by Paperfly. And this is our first haiku on the podcast, if I'm not mistaken. Since a haiku is only 3 lines, I'll read the full thing here and share my thoughts, but make sure you show some love to Paperfly by adding your thoughts and dropping a like at the link in the show notes. So here is Swan by Paperfly. Alabaster Muse. White glass cutting lake water. Long throat spitting reeds. Some truly powerful imagery there. My favorite part about this piece is honestly the imagery. The white glass cutting lake water is probably my favorite line, but all 3 work exquisitely well to paint the picture of a swan. It's funny, I grew up in Florida, so I used to visit Lake Eola Park a lot, if anyone's familiar. Back then, it had a lot of swans, and it still might, but I haven't been there in decades. In any case, I used to love how beautiful the swans were. I always wanted to touch them as a kid. That is until I found out that they bite. Yes, swans are beautiful like this haiku, but they are also quite scary if you don't keep your distance. Just something to know. Wonderful work from Paperfly this week. Third this week is Word of the Day Stories, July 2025 Anthology by Jamie's Grim Tabulations. This is a really impressive compilation of works where Jamie did short fiction, poetry, and even haikus inspired by Merriam-Webster's Word of the Day each day in the month of July 2025. Each one is posted as a note, but you can find them embedded in this post if you'd like to peruse whichever one catches your eye. I love this concept as someone who enjoys prompts, and Jamie encourages others to share their own responses in the comments, so head on over and check it out. Here's an excerpt from day 5 where the word was cantankerous. It was windy, and the storms could be seen brewing on the horizon. Lewis was viewed by the neighborhood as a ne'er-do-good, a punk, and a cantankerous fool all at once. His crime was existing on a cul-de-sac where everyone went to barbecue invites, maintained the yard with either mathematical efficiency or gardening surplus, and most importantly, played the good neighbor games. A great word, and it's well used in this excerpt. Check the show notes for a link to that full anthology. Fourth this week is The Ranger by Brennan Costa. This was part of the recent Weather Reports collection of stories over on Ferns of Colombo, and once again, Brennan has delivered with a story that packs a huge amount of dread and atmosphere into its word count. It tells the story of a ranger isolated alone in a forest watchtower. He's been having trouble reaching HQ over the radio, and the weather's acting weird. Eventually, he decides to head for higher altitude to see if he can get a radio signal. On his journey, he runs into something truly horrific, and the story quickly turns into an intense roller coaster from there. If you've ever played a game called Firewatch, I imagine this story will remind you of that one, but honestly, I wish Firewatch had gone full horror like this as opposed to the more standard ending it had received. Here's an excerpt I enjoyed. "What is that symbol?" I murmured to myself. I looked at the legend at the bottom of the map and started scanning. Let's see. Arete? No. Cave? No. Fire? Watchtower. I paused, staring at the legend. I didn't know there was one out this far. Then a memory resurfaced immediately. This must be the abandoned tower. My supervisor told me about how the watchman disappeared from his post. It must have been 5 years ago at this point. People thought he quit and hiked home. Others had a more cynical take, but nobody really knew. At that point, a knot started forming in my stomach. This is one horror story you don't want to miss. Check the show notes for a link. Our final shout out this week is We Do Not Have Insurance by Celeste. This is a personal essay, and honestly, one of my favorites that I've ever read. It tells the story of children who are trying to have fun, but were constantly reminded by their mom about how they don't have insurance. That, of course, meant that most things were off the table. If it had any level of risk, it was banned. If the children didn't listen, they'd be sent to their uncle's house, who was apparently some sort of mega-church pastor and therefore a nightmare to be around. The piece flows effortlessly, and Celeste's personality shines through in every single line. There's humor, nostalgia, introspection, everything you'd want from a personal essay like this. Things culminate with a secret fireworks experiment that goes about as well as you would expect. I won't spoil everything here, but please check it out, it's well worth a read. Here's an excerpt I enjoyed. But as the 4th of July approached, and test fireworks erupted in the neighborhood, my brother and I grew increasingly antsy with FOMO. One morning, while buying soda at the ice cream truck, also a banned good in our household, the ice cream man's teenage son leaned over and asked if we wanted to have a look at their fireworks selection, a new thing they were trying. And when we said yes, but we don't have a lighter, he pulled one from his shirt pocket, smirked, and said, "On the house," before waving us back into the truck. On the floor of the truck, sparklers, poppets, bottle rockets, Roman candles. A treasure trove of explosives. I handed him our crumpled dollars. He gave us a humble grab bag and sent us on our way. Every day that week, we stopped by the truck for the usual. A Choco Taco, a Powerpuff Girl popsicle, and whatever fireworks the remaining pocket change could buy. Amazing. I really love this one. Check the show notes for a link, and thank you to everyone who shared links in this week's shout-out thread. Remember to check back in my subscriber chat every Tuesday for a new chance to be featured. And next up, our Level 3 Power-Up prompt stories from this week, right after another short message. Today's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast is brought to you by Pantsing.
Ah! What's wrong? I don't know what happens next in my story, and now I'm panicking. Don't you have an outline, Zizzes? No, I'm just pantsing. What's pantsing? It's when you let the story flow. It usually works really well. Let me try. Oh, relaxes this. Wait, I have an idea now. Gives us the keyboard. No, I know where the story should go. So do I. Yes, precious. It's so beautiful. Thanks, Pantsing.
Thank you to Pantsing for sponsoring this episode. Pantsing, an approach that works really well for some writers and terribly for others. Warning, Pantsing is not recommended for writers publishing serial fiction on Substack. Some assembly required, batteries not included. Alright, and we're back. The last power-up prompt switched things up and asked writers to focus their stories on a combination of dialogue and world building. It lasted 2 weeks while I was out of town. All that being said, we only got 2 entries to talk about here, but they're both incredible, so I'm not complaining. Our first level 3 story is The City That Does Not Hoard by Luna Astley Kolsu. This story from Luna immediately grabbed my attention. It cleverly weaves together the world building and dialogue into each other by featuring a scholar who is speaking to their traveling companion about what they're seeing and analyzing its significance in real time. Imagine traveling into an ancient city with an archaeologist. Naturally, they'd be excited to share all their insights with anyone who will listen. So this setup perfectly addresses the prompt while also pulling the reader deeper and deeper into the world. There's also a sense of awe and reverence in the dialogue as well that immediately made me feel a connection to the setting. I felt like I too was journeying into somewhere ancient, somewhere unknowable, but also somewhere special. Luna's work continuously blows me away, and this piece was no different. Check the show notes for a link. Our second power-up prompt story for this week is Irrational, or Rational, depending on how you'd like to read it. The title has the IR in parentheses, by Mina Howell. This piece is a poem that also includes dialogue, which is bolded as well to help it stand out. And Mina's poetry is always incredibly well done. It's very introspective, and this piece is no different. The way that it incorporates the dialogue into the piece without ever interrupting the flow of the poem itself is masterful. The introspective nature of the story as well, combined with the cave setting, makes it incredibly universal and very deeply resonant as well. It's beautiful work, and honestly one of Mina's best poems to date, which is saying something. I highly recommend you check it out, link in the show notes. And that's it for this week's Power Up Prompt Stories. So next, we'll sit down to talk about serial fiction on Substack with some help from Rebecca Rocket, but first, yet another message from, this time, Divine Vacations. Man, I really wish I could take a vacation somewhere unique. Earth is so boring. I want adventure. Hello there, friend. Have you heard about Divine? No, what's that? Divine is the premier vacation destination for those seeking adventure and excitement. Hey, wait a second. That's me. Haha, I had a feeling. I've been a bard for many years, so I know an adventurer when I see one. What kind of packages do you offer? I'm so glad you asked. The Divine Travel Agency allows you to fully customize your excursion to our realm. You can choose from various levels of danger to fuel your desire for adrenaline, thrills, and an escape from your problems. That sounds amazing. I want to fight the Verak Horde. Haha, I'm sure you'll do great. Oh wait, what happens if I get hurt or killed though? Not to worry, our travel packages also include various remembrance options, so your story is not forgotten. Our highest tier guarantees that I myself will tell your story one day. Oh wow! The chance to get away, die in glorious battle, and be remembered forever? Who could ask for a better vacation? I agree. Come on down to the Divine Travel Agency and secure your lasting legacy today. Alright, and we're back. For this week's writing discussion, I'd like to talk about a very relevant and extremely well-written article that I discovered this week on Substack by author Rebecca Rocket. If that name sounds familiar, it's because I featured a chapter of Rebecca's ongoing series called Annalee as a shout-out in a prior episode of the show. The Annalee series is a modern Great Gatsby told in a Rashomon style. The series is fantastic, but it also features a unique structure. You read chapters 1 through 3, then choose your favorite narrator to continue by checking out their specific chapters. For lovers of books like Daisy Jones and the Six, The Duff, and Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, Annalee is a series you definitely want to check out. Given all this experience with serial fiction, Rebecca recently published an article of her own on everything she's learned so far. Serial fiction is huge on Substack, and it's an amazing way to get feedback on your longer works or to create an audience of people who are always eagerly awaiting the next chapter. I myself am launching a serial fiction series of my own called The Order of the Pawn, which is the first ever series set in my fantasy sci-fi realm of Divine. As a result, Rebecca's article had really good timing because it's allowed me to set up my series for success. So, whether you're publishing a series of your own or you plan to in the future, here are a couple of tips from Rebecca's article. You can find a link to the full piece in the show notes. Tip number 1 from Rebecca is to copyright your work. Now, before I get into this, Rebecca asked me to mention that she's not a lawyer, and none of this is legal advice. So you should do your own research into copyright laws where you are, and consult a lawyer as you see fit. But with that out of the way, here's what Rebecca had to say about copywriting your work. If you take only one thing away from reading my post, let it be this: copyright your work. I put that in bold, capital, italicized script. That's how important it is. In fact, this piece of advice is regarding posting anywhere on the internet. I just happened to post it on Substack. I've seen several people complaining about plagiarism of their articles. That sucks, but it would suck even worse if people stole your full-length fiction. You should definitely make sure you have the extra layer of "this is my work, here's my copyright certificate to prove it" protection. It's $60 to register and takes less than an hour to complete the requirements. Just do it. And make sure you list your pen name if you're using one. Tip number 2 from Rebecca's article is to consider chapter navigation. Rebecca says, if you weren't even thinking about chapter navigation, well, start thinking about it. I thought chapter navigation was a given, but I have heard from other writers that folks are missing directories, indexes, and even next previous buttons. These are essential for any website navigation, but especially in a serial. Your engagement/views/readership will suffer if people cannot move from one chapter to the next. We live in a binge culture, whether or not you like it, so do your best to work with it. I automatically put an index at the top of every post, but that was based on how I wanted the novella to be consumed when it was completed, i.e., it should be read as a choose-your-own-adventure by picking your primary narrator. Some folks make a directory posting. Smart. But if you have a lot of chapters, like 70 or more, some just put next previous buttons, and others use the toolbar to make text links or the custom button feature to make buttons as well. There's plenty more in the full article, so check the show notes for a link to the full piece so you can learn how to best set up your serial fiction for success. And thanks to Rebecca again for publishing this amazing resource. Next up is my interview with Fintan Marybrook right after one more short message. All hail the algorithm. The algorithm knows all. The algorithm decides who is seen and who falls into the void. All hail the algorithm. Feed the algorithm content. It hungers for content. Also, bring it $5 biggie bag meals from Wendy's. It likes those too. All hail the algorithm. And we're back. And that was me channeling my inner Welcome to Night Vale fan there with that last segue. All right, on to a special interview this week with the greatest storyteller in all of Devine, Fintan Marybrook. Fintan, thanks for being here.
Hello, I'm sorry. It's actually the greatest storyteller in all of Devine.
That's what I said, isn't it?
You said the words, yes, but your delivery was lacking.
Right, well, I wanted to talk to you about the history of the realm, what inspired you to form the Order, and what's next for Devine.
Of course, but why don't we start by flipping the script?
What do you mean?
Well, you're the one who brought Devine tales to the people of Earth. Care to share how you made such a connection?
Okay, it's a fair question. Yeah, so Devine started years and years ago. I had this idea for a story about a medieval kingdom being invaded by aliens, and I had actually pitched it to a publisher that I was working with at the time, a very small one over on Amazon, and they were like, thanks, but no thanks, but I couldn't let go of the idea. And so that concept ended up being the story The Tomb Where Marigolds Grow, which was the first Devine tale. And as part of that, I was also inspired by the Arthur C. Clarke quote, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." I just loved that line. And it got me thinking about, okay, what if we expand this into a world where there's not only science and technology, but magic as well? And what does that look like? So that's kind of how Devine got started. Okay, so here's a question for you. What led you to form the Order of the Pawn, and what's the name mean anyway?
Well, as you know, Devine faces all manner of strange and terrifying threats, like the Rot and the Varak Horde, and I, as someone who helped create Devine, want to see it flourish again. So I've always had this idea to put together a group of guardians, if you will, and the Order of the Pawn is that. It is a combination of warriors and adventurers that I have heard about throughout stories across my time in Devine, and they inspired me to bring them together. As far as the name is concerned, well, the way the Order will function is that we will not take payment. Instead, we will ask that people pawn something of value in exchange for our services. If we are successful, we will keep the item and use it to fund our further ventures. If we are not successful, the item will be returned forthwith, and in this way we can gain the people's trust.
Oh, that's really interesting, Fenton. I like that. So, speaking of returning Devine to its former glory, you've used the Chronoscepter to change the past before, as we know from other Devine tales. Do you plan to do that again in the series? Listen, I only know of 2 chronospheres in Devine, but there were always 7, one for each Titan. Their power is immense, but so is the cost. I don't use it lightly, but I will if it means saving the realm. That's all I'll say for now. All right, well, can you tell us a little bit more about the members of the Order and why you chose them? Well, the best way to do that, my friend, is to check out the Devine Preludes. You'll find that there are 6 of them, and in each one, you'll find out more about one of the members of the Order and why they were chosen by myself. I highly recommend you check them out over at the Writer's Journey content directory. Ha! I appreciate the shout-out, Fenton. All right, so when can we expect the series to launch? Haha, nice try. But I'm saving that announcement for next week's episode of the Penny Dreadfuls podcast, as I mentioned earlier. Hey, you know what? I had to try. Indeed, but I am loyal to my friends. Also, I like Mina's Devine tales more than yours. Okay, fair enough. Thanks for coming on the show, Fenton. Of course. I wish you a speedy recovery. After all, I need someone to tell my tales. I appreciate it. Thanks, my friend. And thanks again to Fenton for joining me on the show today for that quick interview. Given the shorter format for this week, we're going to jump straight to a look at next week on Substack. All right, if you made it all the way here listening to my sick voice, I appreciate you. I know these last couple episodes have been a little different while I was out of town and then sick, but I assure you next week things will be back to normal one way or another. I myself will be trying to work on some new story ideas, and I'm thinking about getting back into my cosmic horror novel I've been writing on and off for almost a decade now. I recently got some beta reader feedback that really rejuvenated my desire to work on it, so shout out to Wild Nebula and Richard Pack, who were a couple of the people in that writing group that are also here on Substack. And also, tomorrow we'll have a new power-up prompt. I'm going to go back to the genre sort of setup, so if you weren't a fan of the kind of dialogue world-building thing we did last week, don't worry, we're going back to the normal sort of vote for each genre every week setup that I've had for the first 9 power-up prompts. Just wanted to try something out different with that longer one. And this coming week, I'll also be a guest on Mina Howell's Penny Dreadfuls podcast, as I mentioned in this episode. I'll be discussing her recent Devine prompt and the stories that were submitted to that. And I'll be making a special announcement regarding the upcoming Devine series, The Order of the Pawn. So make sure that you tune in. And if you haven't submitted a story yet, you have until September 1st to do so. So head on over to Mina's profile to see that visual that she created for the prompt. And if you have any questions about Devine before you get started writing, you can always DM me. And that's all I've got for this week. Being sick really sucks, but I'm getting better. Life is tough enough without feeling crappy on top of it all, but I know we've all been there, so I'm sure you understand. In any case, we keep pushing forward. We rest when we can, and we record podcasts throughout it all, apparently. Anyway, thanks again for being here as always. I'm wishing you all a productive week of writing, and this is Bradley Ramsey, signing off. Dear me, could you stop coughing? It sounds like you're about to hack up a lung. I'm sorry, Fenton. I'm just still getting over this cold. Honestly, one of the segues this week should have been a sponsorship from Cough Drops. It's the only way I managed to record this episode.